In the shadowed corners of New Orleans, United States of America, nestled within a modest orphanage for young girls, there was a teacher who found joy in her work. The days were long, the pay was low, too low, and the children's chatter could wear her thin, but she found happiness in teaching them, giving these forgotten girls a glimpse of a brighter future. At first, the days passed like any other. She would sit in her classroom watching the light of curiosity in each of the young girls' eyes. But slowly, that light began to dim. Their once cheerful faces turned hollow, their expressions vacant, like they carried a secret too heavy for their small little shoulders. The teacher felt it too, a quiet, creeping unease. She tried to push it aside, telling herself it was nothing. But then the whispers started to begin. One child came to her, and then another, and they spoke in very low, hushed voices, each with the same exact story. And while she was listening to them speak, she saw the bruises and the scars across their young bodies. It did not look natural. It looked like someone or something was hurting them. And she didn't know what it was. She asked them, her voice very unsteady. She said, Who did this to you? They said, that woman. The teacher's heart started pounding. Her breathing became hitched and shallow. She looked around, desperate for answers. She's like, what woman? Their eyes, though, didn't waver. They didn't need to say anymore. The weight of their words started to hit her all at once. This wasn't the work of any living person. This was something else. Something that had always been in the orphanage with them. And then she remembered where she was exactly, where the orphanage stood. This wasn't just any ground. It wasn't just any land. These walls were built on the ruins of the LaLaurie Mansion, a place drenched in mystery and haunted by its own unspeakable history. As she pieced it together, a shiver ran through her. What could she do? Who would believe her? These were the orphan girls in the late 19th century, African American children in a world that refused to listen to them. And yet, here they were, caught in the grip of a malevolent force that refused to leave the teacher and the girls at peace. Content warning. This video includes description of violence, murder, death, rituals, and other supernatural content. Listener discretion is advised, as some stories may be unsettling or sensitive to certain audiences. Turn down the lights, snuggle up tight, and get ready for another Tuck Tale. What happens when the line between fact and folklore blurs? Welcome to Tuck Tales, where urban legend meet true crime and myth aren't always just stories. My name is Afrina, your host for today, and
my name is Diski.
And today we are covering one of the more controversial stories that happened in the 1800s. It was a time where racism and violence towards a lot of minority races were prevalent, and slavery was still being practiced. So if that's too much for you at the time, please click off, rewatch at another time, or choose one of our episodes to watch. Hers, mine, it's whatever. But if you guys are still here, without further ado, let's start on the story of the haunted LaLaurie Mansion and the person at the center of it all, the owner of the house, Madame Delphine LaLaurie. In 1787, in New Orleans, in a country which is known as the Great United States of America today, a girl named Mary Delphine McCarty was born to a very, very wealthy family. At the time, though, the colony of Louisiana was governed by Spain. So Spain governed that area at the time that she was born. Spain governed it for nearly 4 decades, from 1763 until March 1803 for a few months, before France sold it to the USA. During this time, the Spanish colonial period, there was a dramatic expansion of slavery. Rich people mostly owned a lot of plantations, and that is where the trading of slaves grew. And Delphine was born to one of these rich families that owned slaves. The men of the families mostly had military backgrounds and were landowners, with her father being knighted as the Chevalier of the Royal and Military Order of St. Louis. So basically, they were wealthy and they were also of high status in the country. By 1794, her family had 1,344 acres of plantations. Now, if you don't know what acres is, I'll make it to square feet. It's about 43,560 square feet.
Wow.
It's huge. Now, her mother was known to be quite the party person. While her father was high status, her mother loved to host parties, going to parties, staying up until late in the AMs. There were reports that some nights she would even jump into the river and the canal of a property and have fun, and her friends and her would steal the clothes and the shoes of guests who are male that came there
Oh my
and then
god.
jumped in the river, and then forcing them to go home in bare feet and in just their nightly attire. So she was quite the rebel at the time, her mother. But in 1807, when Delphine was only 20 years old, her mother passed away. Her father, being a bit lonely now that his wife has gone, he sought companion in a rather non-traditional manner at the time to a free quadroon. Now, I had to search what a quadroon means, and it means that you are 1/4 black ancestry and 3/4 white.
There is a term for that?
There was. I don't think anyone uses it anymore, but
Oh,
to think that it's 1/4 black,
yeah.
3/4 white is
It's crazy.
it's a bit crazy. At the time, everything was okay, honestly. So in other words, one of her grandparents was of African descent. The new wife's name was Sophie Musante. Actually, I don't think they ever married officially. In 1815, 8 years later, Sophie gave birth to a daughter, Delphine Emmersy McCarthy. Delphine and her brother Louis were named as her godparents. So the new daughter is also named Delphine. It's a bit confusing. A little side note before we continue to the story, it was uncommon to see biracial couples at the time, but in the McCarty family, a lot of the men actually had relationships with, at the time, known as women of color. Delphine's father, uncle, cousins, and other associates contributed to the development of biracial free people of color. Some research even proves that there were quite a few women of mixed race who were in relations and had children with the Makati men. Now, just remember this fact while I go back to the Delphine story, okay? Now, let's rewind the time a bit to when Delphine's mom was still alive and when Delphine herself was only 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
14 is such a young age, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you remember how you were at 14?
I was in middle school.
I
was a teenager.
I don't even know what I was doing at 14. But apparently Delphine knew what she was doing because she got married at 14 years old. She married a guy, and although there were no records of whether or not the marriage was fruitful or marriage was happy, but let's just assume it was somewhat marriage for love, if even a 14-year-old girl can fall in love like that. So her husband at that time had been a 35-year-old widow.
Oh my god.
See the age difference?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Is he rich though?
He is.
Oh, I see.
He is a 35-year-old widow who had lost his wife on a ship from Spain to Louisiana. He was an officer of the Spanish crown and second in command of the Louisiana government. He was an influential figure, but he did have some issues with the crown at the time, but I'll just cut it short. But because of these issues, Ramon, her husband, kept being moved around the globe by the crown. But after many efforts and struggles, and even Delphine actually visited the queen to get him pardoned, he was pardoned. And at this time, Delphine was pregnant and waiting for him in Havana so they could return to New Orleans together, to her hometown. But this is where tragedy struck. The ship that Ramon boarded had hit a sandbar off the shores and he was killed.
Oh my god.
Before reaching Delphine.
Do you think this is his fate or it's a conspiracy from the crown? Like they killed him off.
That's interesting. Because he died the same way his first wife died.
Yeah. And also there was the time where they pardoned him.
Yeah, they did. And then when he was on the way home,
Mm-hmm.
he died. So maybe, I don't know, but Delphine then, because he passed away, she had to give birth to a baby daughter alone. But she named her Mary Delphine and returned to New Orleans as a widow and a lone mother. When she returned to her home that was now actually no longer under the Spanish or the French rule. She returned it when it was under American ownership. Being a widow at 19 years old with a newborn must have been hard for Delphine, because a year later, on her 20th birthday, just a few weeks after her mother had died, remember? She married an older Frenchman and also a widower. His name is Jean-Paul Blanc. But a lot of rumors surfaced that when Delphine's mother died, her estate, her house, was divided between Delphine's mom's 3 children. So when this happened and then Delphine married her new husband, people whispered that perhaps Jean, the new husband, saw this as an opportunity to get her inheritance because she married him a few weeks after her mother died.
Oh, I see.
It's a bit weird timing. But her second husband was also reputable in his own rights. He was a ruthless businessman as they know it, who had been active in slave trade and politics. Aside from the money inheritance, her mother also left her with a downtown plantation on the bank of the Mississippi River with 52 slaves and livestock and other farm equipment. Now, her father also gifted her another plantation with additional 26 slaves.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a lot. So in today's value, her inheritance was actually over $2 million. By 1815, Delphine had 5 kids, the eldest being her first daughter. But that was also when her husband passed away when she was only 28 years old. So this is her second husband that had passed, and she was left to settle his estate that consisted of debt. And in today's currency, that debt was over $2.5 million.
Oh my god.
So it's over what she earned in the inheritance. But she was not dumb, you guys. She was really smart. The year after that, in 1816, she renounced their community property. She forfeited all of their mutual assets so she can protect and keep her personal property and assets. She said, that's not mine. I'm gonna let it go. I don't want anything to do with that. So what she did was, over the next 10 whole years, she auctioned off much of his property. She sold it, including the enslaved people, to try and pay off those debts little by little. And she even purchased one piece of his property herself at an auction and also retained some of the slaves that he owned. But the weird thing was, at around this time, 8 of the enslaved people that she had owned died in a span of 5 years. Most of them were children or women of childbearing age, and the causes were unknown. But at the time, a lot of these things were happening, so nothing really came out of it. People weren't really investigating or found it weird. But 8 people in 5 years, I think it's a bit much.
Yeah.
The debt her ex-husband left her should have depleted her wealth, but her father passed away in 1824, leaving his children with even more inheritance. She just kept getting money and money and money,
After losing some, she gets more.
Yeah. So at 38 years old, Delphine had once again found someone to marry. Maybe she was a really lonely woman.
At the time, it's really common for a woman to depend on men. And it's very weird to be a widow or to be single.
But I think it goes both ways. Like men as well, they remarry.
Oh yeah.
Quite often. So in 1825, she arrived in France and the romance with a young chiropractor began. But things happened and they said that Delphine had become pregnant with the chiropractor's child out of wedlock. So she didn't actually get married to him yet. 5 months after the birth of their son together, then they got married.
Scandalous.
Scandalous at the time. She was 40 years old. But Dr. Lewis, the guy that she married, was only 25 years old. But hey, this time we finally have records on how their marriage went. Instead of the first 2, we just know basic facts, but this one we have a little bit more. Witnesses, friends, and family around them reported that their marriage was actually not a happy marriage. They fought so much and then separated and then found their way back to each other again and then fought and then broke up. It's just like today's relationship. But in 1831, Delphine purchased the lots on a property which would eventually become what we know, the LaLaurie Mansion. And in 1832, the couple finally had enough, finally called it quits, guys, and had a divorce. after all these fights. So this is the first one where the husband didn't die and they just got a divorce. Delphine claimed that the divorce was because LaLaurie had treated her in such a manner as to render their living together insupportable. So this is why Delphine's last name is LaLaurie. 2 years after they had separated, the mansion that Delphine had been living in caught on fire. This is 2 years after the mansion was bought. And while bystanders and citizens in a panic disarray, they tried to put the fire off, they noticed something strange as they went inside to help out Delphine. Just as within any scandal, the stories grew over time, but the immediate reports and eyewitness accounts are horrifying and they're atrocious. They said that 7 slaves were rescued from deplorable conditions. They said that their bodies was covered with scars and loaded with chains. They were tied with chains in the house. They were taken out on stretchers and delivered to safety. While because the citizens seized what's going on inside the house, a mob proceeded to destroy all the furnitures of the home in such an outrage fit. A judge at the time that was proceeding the case was a neighbor of the LaLauries. He was one of the first to arrive at the fire. Some of the early arrivals began to help the LaLauries transfer their valuables out of the house to safekeeping in case the fire started to spread from the original place. A few of the concerned citizens began to tell that judge about the captive slaves that they had found in the house, prompting the judge to politely ask permission of LaLauries to have the slaves removed and taken to safety. So because this is someone that has a bit of authority, the people were like, please, can you help us to take the slaves out of the house? And it is reported that LaLaurie replied, there are those who would be better employed if they would attend to their own affairs instead of intermeddling with the concerns of other people. So he basically said, mind your own business. But they were chained and they had scars and everything. So as the flames began to spread, the judge that was from earlier gave the orders to break down the doors. It's too much now. The fire is spreading. It was then that the citizens were met with a scene that they could not have been prepared for. There was more to the story. Depending on the source, the level of discovery of how gore it is actually varied, but even the tamest of depictions is nothing less than just very, very fucked up. The mob mentality shifted and people began smashing the contents of the mansion, destroying their property, destroying their belongings, no different from the way that the LaLauries had treated the poor people in their home. They wanted to just take revenge. Like, this is inhuman. The more sensationalized of the LaLaurie victims had these poor people, they were actually said that they were horribly mutilated, with some of them suspended by their neck on top of the ceiling.
Yeah, that's so cruel.
And their extremities stretched and they were even torn apart from their bodies, their limbs. They saw that there were 2 people that were alive and one of them was wearing an iron collar. It was very large, it was very heavy, and he was chained with heavy irons by the feet. And he couldn't walk, you guys, like neck and feet and everything. So the slaves there, some of them passed away and some of them lived, but their conditions wasn't really the best. Days after the fire, it was reported that one of the slaves who had been saved and rescued from the house did not survive because of their scars and their damages, and that bones were actually excavated from the LaLaurie's courtyard. They found bones buried in there. It was documented that one set of the bones were those of a young slave that Madame Delphine had chased straight out of a window, allowing the young girl to fall to her death. There were opposing reports printed, and they did say that maybe the death and the bones weren't really true, but some of them did say that it was true and there were eyewitnesses over there. But as it happened such a long time ago, nobody knows what really happened. But it seemed that the atrocities that she did happen. As the truth got exposed, she didn't know what to do. She knew, though, that she had to leave. And in fact, she did have one loyal servant on her staff. I don't know why. So amid all the flames and the mayhem and the panic, her enslaved coachman brought her a carriage around the house, and Delphine went inside the carriage very, very confidently. It is said that the citizens that were watching, they were like stunned. like, what is she doing? Why is she in a carriage, right? They immediately got out of that stunt because she bolted. Delphine just bolted. She was with the horses and stuff, and the coachman whipped the horses to run.
Oh, I see.
So basically she was just running from the situation, and the coachman brought her to the docks, and she was successful in her escape because she sailed away to France. Delphine and Louis eventually ended up in Paris, with Delphine's children coming over for extended stays and stuff. Shortly after, more of her family moved to Paris, where they all occupied the homes, and then she had a family back together. It was like a happy ending. Like, what a...
No, I don't like it.
I don't like it either. Like, how can she not get caught?
Yeah.
It is said that Delphine died in Paris on December 7th, 1849. The police department at the time reported that she just died, but did not specify the cause of death. But we know from the letters between her and her children, they said that she had a lingering illness. That could have been why she passed away, but it was mysterious. Like, we don't know what illness it was. They just said illness. The mansion that had been left after, it had gone through a lot of rebrandings, from being an apartment complex and then to an all-girls school and then to the orphanage that we talked about just now. But it can never escape the stories and the rumors swirling the house that it was haunted, because there were a lot of people who died in the house. Many of them actually reported sightings of the slaves who had lost their lives in there, and some of them even reported seeing Delphine herself there as a ghost. But we would never know unless me and you, we go to the place and see, because they turned it into a museum now.
Oh yeah.
They turned it into the museum and they put history and the story of what she did.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. I do want to go and see it though.
Yeah, me too.
So that's it for the story of Madame LaLaurie. What do you think about the story?
It's so I don't like story like this, because I just can't comprehend how a human being can treat others like that. And the fact that she got a happy ending with her family. I just, like, when when I was listening to your story, I was like, oh, I hope she will get a karma or something. But
it's
no.
so sad, but it's just, in the history, I wonder how many stories have like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially back then.
Especially, there must be a lot of buried story like this.
Yeah. But that's all for the story, and if you are someone who loves creepy stories based on legends, just tune in to our podcast, available in all podcasting platforms, for episodes in English with me every single Friday and Diski on Tuesdays. That's all.
Bye.
Bye.